what really happens.
Okay.
It's good to be alive in this land of ours. Good to drive in this land of ours.
Hello, Canadian hockey fans in the United States.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Hockey Time Machine. I'm Glenn Dreyfus. Get that popcorn popping because we have some amazing video to share with you. The first ever Paul Patskou Film Festival. And while you're shaking that Jiffy Pop over the stove, let me read to you a quote from the New York Times about our Hockey Time Machine executive producer. The speaker is John Shannon, the former executive producer of Hockey Night in Canada. Shannon said, quote, "If you're talking archival footage and the history of the game, Paul Patskou is a legend." And the Times went on to call Paul an unsung hero in the hockey world. Paul was a guest recently on the Sign Off podcast, and co-host Mikey Aaronworth described his list of accomplishments better and faster than I could.
Someone who has dedicated his life to the preservation of hockey history. He's an archivist, writer, researcher, historian, and probably knows more about the sport than the combined knowledge of all of our listeners. He's been dubbed the Columbo of historical sports videos and is readily called on by the Hockey Hall of Fame, TSN, Sportsnet, CBC, and the NHL to provide guidance, authority, and insight into the world of hockey.
So, Paul, how did you end up being the Indiana Jones of hockey archival footage?
Well, I didn't intend it to be that way, but back in the 90s, I always wondered if I could watch games from the past. And I started looking, and everyone said they didn't exist, and that includes the CBC and everyone else. And one day I got a break, went to the National Archives, found a whole bunch, and because I knew they were all there, everybody thought I was a genius. And then one thing led to another, and I became the go-to person for video.
And on this show, we're going to prove that you are a genius because these clips we're going to show over the next hour or so are remarkable. Let's start with two goalie stories. You found a clip from 1942 that solves the mystery of the disappearing goalie. I want to start by showing the famous photo. So what's missing in this photo, Paul?
Well, it's a goaltender. Now, this is 1942. It's Pete Langio's winning goal. The Leafs had lost the first 3 games, came back and won the next 4. Pretty famous. And this is the winning goal. Now, people say it can't be that photo. There's no goalie. They must have pulled the goalie. It's a different game entirely. Well, no, it's not. Although there is no goalie, you can't see a goalie. But let's see what really happens.
Okay. I've got the video here. 1942. First, we'll see it at regular speed.
Yeah. There you go. Is
And
that
now,
continued interference? Yeah.
well, that proves that the goalie was actually at the game.
That's right.
And here he is, kind of far out of his net. And he gets knocked over, I think, by one of his own teammates.
That's right. And it comes down, and Pete Langell is famous now. And the goalie's looking at it. So, what am I doing out here?
And he never gets up. He's still on the ice by the time the goal is scored.
That's right. See how video can prove something, and like this is from the opposite angle, obviously, and everybody has seen that Tarowski photo, but no one knows what happened to the goalie. And there you go.
Until now.
That's right.
Detroit goalie Roger Crozier wishes he could have disappeared before a play against the Leafs. We're going to show the clip Paul found from Hockey Night in Canada, and then we'll get Paul's reaction to it.
Carl Brewer to Mahavlich, the Pulford to Mahavlich. There's the shot. Oh, he hit Crozier right on the side of the shoulder. It may have got him in the face. He seems to be all right, though. Whether that caught him in the face or not, it's hard to say. He may have just got it on the shoulder. Fans are giving him a terrific hand.
Roger Crozier, I felt, kept Detroit in the hockey game in the first period. So both teams had 14 shots, but a lot of the Detroit shots on Bauer were long shots. Crozier was handling a lot of tricky close-in shots, and in the second period, the same thing. He got hurt on that hard, high shot by Mahavlich. Went to the dressing room for a few minutes. He came back. It didn't seem to bother him at all. And throughout the game, I thought he played really major league goal for Detroit.
Here are the 3 stars of tonight's game as selected by Ken McKee. The first star, Roger Crozier.
Crozier had a hard luck career. I mean, he was a wonderful, wonderful, magical goalie, but suffered from stomach issues and all kinds of stuff, including pucks to the face. But Paul, what's the backstory?
Wow. This November 30th, 1963, a week earlier, President Kennedy was shot. So things were a little bit down anyways, but for some reason, the Leafs had a circus just on that day, on Saturday, and elephants and leaving their deposits and all that on the rink. And, you know, they're going to play the game no matter what. That would never happen today. I called the brown ice game because the ice was brown, it was chippy and dangerous, and they still played it. Now, as soon as Johnny Bauer went out for the pregame warm-up, he put a mask on. He got frightened. He said, I can't play this. Eventually did play without the mask, but he thought this is too dangerous. And he actually wore a mask in the pregame warm-up. People don't know that. Now, this particular game, people usually tuned in at, I guess, 8:30 at this time, but the game was delayed, so they got to see more of the action. And during the intermissions, you know, the Ward Cornell says to Jack Dennett, well, they did a good job of cleaning up the ice. Well, they didn't. And the thing with Mahavlich there, he took a slap shot, but the puck was on cement, you know, not on the ice. And it went up and hit Roger Crozier. This was Roger Crozier's first NHL game. And he stayed in the game. And he came out for one of the first stars. And then he was off for weeks because of a broken jaw. Can you imagine anyone not even playing a game like that in those conditions, but, you know, staying in with a broken jaw, no mask?
I can't imagine that. And you're right about the no mask part. I had a former goalie tell me once, who played without a mask, that your head moves quicker than any other part of your body. And that's why the goalies didn't get more pucks to the head. But I want to call a little BS on that because, boy, that just seems like an invitation to disaster. And the fact that Crozier stayed in the game, unbelievable.
Yeah. Terrible conditions to play a game in. And nowadays that would not happen. You know, but I just found it interesting that Johnny Bauer was planning on wearing a mask because he saw the conditions. And when you have ice and cement, and anything can happen. So it's a quite interesting game to watch. Gordie Howe is honored because he had just recently became the leading goal scorer of all time. And intermissions have the referee explaining things. It's a tremendous game to watch. And, you know, maybe someday they'll bring back classic games. We can show it.
You brought up Gordie Howe, and That's a perfect segue because you found an interview with both Gordie Howe and Maurice Richard. It would have been noteworthy enough just having those two in the same studio, but Paul found an interview with them. There's something special and a little different about this interview. We'll play it and then have Paul comment on it.
Maurice Richard and Gordie Howe. And this is Maurice on my far left and Gordie Howe on my immediate left. And they're both 11 years old. And what's the team you're with, Maurice?
The Sacred Heart Richelieu.
Uh-huh. And it's what division?
CYO division.
And is it squirt or pee-wee?
Pee-wee.
Pee-wee, eh? And how's the team doing this year?
Pretty good.
Have you scored any goals yet?
Not yet, sir.
Not yet. And what about you, Gordie? Have you had any goals yet for the year?
Yes, I have, sir.
How many?
4, sir.
And what position do you play in the team?
I play left wing on the first line, and sometimes I play defense.
That sounds like another Gordie Howe I know. And Maurice, is this your first visit to Maple Leaf Gardens?
Yes, sir.
And how have you enjoyed it so far?
It's real good.
You like it, eh? Have you been here before, Gordie?
Yes, I have quite a few times.
Quite a few times, so it isn't a new experience for you. Well, boys, just before I introduce you to another guest of ours, who's your favorite hockey player, Maurice?
Henry Richard.
Henry Richard. And what about you, Gordie?
Howe.
Pardon?
Howe.
Gordie Howe. Well, that's good. Now I'd like you to meet him now, boys. And Gord, perhaps you could lean over. Maurice Richard and Gordie Howe.
Gordie?
Good. Thank you very much, boys. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the game. And good luck in the season for you.
I can't say much. I understood he was a Mihaljevic fan.
What about that?
On the Maple Leaf, it's Mahalik, but all over the place, too.
Thank you very much.
Well, Gord, it's nice to have you with us. Tell me, how's the head injury?
The head injury is very fine, to tell you the truth, Ward. It's a lot better than what I look out there right now, believe me. But it's, I'd say the headaches left me roughly 6 to 7 days after I got the immediate injury, so there wasn't very much to it, but the precautionary measures, they let me out for a little extra time.
Now, what about the helmet? How long are you going to have to wear it?
Well, I understand after you get hit on the head, the safe period's roughly about a month and a half, so I've had it on my head for a month, and it's just like a steam heater, believe me.
I was going to say, do you like it or not?
Well, it saved my neck here when we played over in Montreal a few days back. I went down the heap with players, and the end of a skate caught me in the back of the helmet and ripped it a little. If the helmet hadn't have been on there, I'd have had a little scalp wound again, but I kissed it at that time, but out there tonight, it's a hot night on the ice, and I'm perspiring to death out there.
Actually, Gordie, as you remember the collision with Shaq, just how did it happen?
Well, actually, you don't remember those things. I don't know if the knock throws back your memory a few minutes or not, but all I can recall is that Ed and Red Kelly, the former teammate, were making a man-on-man rush as two defensemen back, and I was the anchor man on the play, so I come back on my side. I looked around. No player was on my side to check, so I moved over to give a little assistance to Pronovo, I believe, and Godfrey, and in doing so, I guess I took my eyes off Shaq for a minute, and I had a peek to see where Red was moving, and at that time he moved over as I was doing to intercept him, and we collided. Now, how we collided, I don't know. I did wake up with your good doctor here in the Gardens taking real good care of me.
Gordie, in a situation like this, do players hold grudges at all?
No, not really, for the simple fact that I believe, as all the other players believe, we're in this thing for a living, and it's a mighty fine living. And any time you surprise any individual such as I did Shaq, he has a habit of going to the air, and naturally we all put our lumber out in front of us. Anybody's going to hit me, they have to come through their handle before they get a piece of me. Unfortunately, I forgot the habit for a minute when Shaq ran into me, but he didn't. And so I come out with an injury. But I did surprise him, and his only immediate defense was to get off his feet and put the lumber out in front of him, which he did. I can't hold grudges against him. I've hurt players right here in the Gardens. I put Todd Sloan, as a matter of fact, out of the playoffs, and the headlines at that time was, "Shoot Lindsay or Howe if they show up on the ice." That was a real threat, believe me, and we're going to make a real hero out of Marcel Bonin at the time, put a 9 on the front and a 7 on the back, see if the fellow was serious.
Yeah, I remember that.
But you hurt players, and believe it or not, when you hurt an individual, inwardly that hurts the player that hurt the guy. So I don't know what kind of an individual Shaq is. I haven't had too much opportunity to be around in his presence, but I do know if he's got any pride or self-control at all, I think he'd feel sorry for hurting an individual.
Gordie, in your own career, what do you think your chances are of equaling or surpassing the Rockets' 544 goals in the league play? You now are at 459.
Oh, that's good news to
Yeah,
me.
I added to that.
Oh, well, I don't know. I've always said the way things are going this year, I got 2 chances. That's slim and none at all. But I hope things change, such as Mihalovic, a great hockey player. We always say he's got everything, and I hope over the 15 years something I've had kept me in the league and something made me get as many goals as I have. I just hope that maybe the coach or somebody can find that little extra bit of luck or whatever it is so I can start potting a few. But when they hand you your paycheck, believe me, when you're not scoring, you feel a little guilty.
You do, eh?
There's a lot to unpack there, Paul. Where do you want to start?
Well, let's start with the young Maurice Richard. When I received this, I thought, well, wouldn't it be nice to find this fellow and see if I can send him the tape? Well, it turns out, found him in Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, someplace like that, and sent it to him. Unbelievable. I didn't track down the Gordie Howe kid. Would have liked to, but I think it's great to be able to show that to him, have him see himself as 11-year-old on Hockey Night Canada. Now, the Gordie Howe interview is very revealing. Now, that Eddie Shack hit is it's a famous photo. You see Gordie on the ice and he's bleeding and Lefty Wilson smelling salts and all that, try to get him up. And so first time he's ever talked about that. And he does hold grudges. He says he doesn't, but Gordie Howe holds grudges like you wouldn't believe. And but he's right about keeping the lumber up. And he admitted to knocking Todd Sloan out of the playoffs in 55. Now, there's a famous photo of Ted Lindsay using his stick as a machine gun after a playoff game, that same playoff series that Todd Sloan was knocked out by Gordie Howe. And the shooter sent anonymous notes saying he's going to shoot Lindsay and Howe. And of course, it didn't happen. But at the end, Ted Lindsay, who scored the overtime winning goal in that game, he just took the stick and he started pointing it at the crowd. And that's another famous photo. He actually asked me to find that film. I found the film of the game, but Shane McKenzie, who filmed the game back then, he didn't continue on with seeing Lindsay on the ice. But yeah, that's quite a story. And this is quite an intermission interview. I mean, it goes on and you learn things from Gordie. He may not have been genuine about not holding grudges, but but it was interesting to listen to.
Also, he talks about wearing a helmet, and I don't recall seeing photos of Gordie Howe wearing a helmet, but apparently he did for a couple of months after this injury. Yeah, we can show the photos another time. It shows him playing with, it's a helmet, but it's nothing like they have today. It's different. That's a second head injury. The first one was 1950 playoffs. So this one was, pretty devastating if you look at the photo. He called the helmet a steam heater. Apparently, it wasn't like the helmets of today, not only in terms of protection, but also in terms of like it'll cook your brain. Yeah, it's kind of funny. We should show that sometime. The other thing is, Gordie was a 15-year vet at the time of this interview, and he was asked, are you going to break the Rockets' goal record? Well, he would have 342 more goals in him, and that's in the NHL, not to mention 174 more in the WHA. So he wasn't done by a long shot. Yeah. See, that was his last year as captain of the Red Wings, I think, as well. So I thought that was something interesting to show. This is remarkable footage, first because it exists at all. The first ever NHL All-Star game, also known as the Ace Bailey Benefit Game, February 14th, 1934 at Maple Leaf Gardens. Paul, first, tell us why the game was called that. Well, because in Boston a few months earlier, Eddie Shore had hit Ace Bailey, the Leaf forward, from behind and almost killed him. In fact, they didn't think he'd make it. And of course, there was a lot of commotion after that, and Bailey could never play hockey again. So they had a benefit game for him, and they got players from all the teams, the best players in this All-Star game and benefit game, so that he could have some
money to live on. And so that's why it's benefit game. The fact that this footage exists is remarkable too, because you got all the great stars from the 30s in there. And Eddie Short played, of course, and Ace Bailey was watching. And it was, interesting. The intermissions back then, they had figure skating on the ice. It was different than what they have now, where they just have clean the ice. But back then it was different. A lot of things you learn by looking at the video. And so many things happened in the 30s. And I always wanted to do a documentary on the gas house gang of the 30s of the Leafs, because you've got the Shore Bailey incident, you've got all these things that happened. And we have the footage too. So it's good.
For the record, the game was played between the Maple Leafs and a team of all-stars, 2 players from each of the other 8 teams in the league. And for the record, the Maple Leafs won the game 7-3.
Good.
And Conn Smythe, the Maple Leafs boss, then announced no other Toronto player would ever wear Bailey's number 6, and that was the first time a player's number was retired in the NHL.
That number 6 was used again by Ronnie Ellis, because Ace Bailey liked the way he played, and he said, "Can you wear it?" And the big ceremony we can show some other time of Ace Bailey presenting this sweater number 6 to Ronnie Ellis.
And the first quote-unquote official NHL All-Star game wasn't played until 1947, 13 years later.
Yeah, but there was another one or two in between, the Howie Morenz game, and we can show that on another show. And then it became a tradition after that. Although in those days, All-Star games were not like they are now. I mean, teams wanted to win. You had fights, you had people with broken legs, everything. And now, well, I don't know what you can call it now.
One of those intermission skating exhibitions that you mentioned?
Yeah, there's figure skating. They had the thing about All-Star games is that when you had the Stanley Cup winning team playing against the rest of the league, yeah, they wanted to win, you see. But back those days, there's no fraternization. It was kind of a tough thing for players to get together to play with each other. They hated each other. It was so there's a lot of tension, and they all wanted to win. And I think the first All-Star game of 47, Bill Mosienko broke his leg. And Chicago, he was Chicago's best player. So it was pretty devastating to that team.
Well, we'll go back to 1938 now for a game between the Blackhawks and the Leafs. And there's a story here too, right, Paul?
Oh, for sure. Now, let's see. We'll let it run a little bit, and then I'll explain what happens here.
I think the title of this might be, "What's it all about, Alfie?"
Yeah. Okay, so Busher Jackson scores. Now, that's a goalie named Goodman. Now, the story here is the first game of the finals in 1938, Chicago was visiting Toronto. Their goalie, Mike Caracas, is injured. He can't play. Now, they don't have backup goalies on the bench at this point. So Davy Kerr, an all-star goalie, is in the stands, but Conn Smythe won't let Chicago use him. It's too good. And Conn Smythe gets into a fist fight with the Chicago owner. Black eyes and everything. Think that'll happen today? So they had a goalie who they knew was in town, and he was at home, and he was a minor league goalie. His name was Alfie Moore, and they called him, and he came in and he played. He actually won the game for Chicago. But the Chicago fans and media and ownership were so much against the way that they were treated, is that even back in 1938, they kept saying, well, the Leafs, Toronto thinks they're the center of the hockey universe. Unbelievable, even back then. And so one of the writers, now the story was that they took Alfie Moore out of a tavern and threw him in the net. And that has lasted for how many years, that story? And it wasn't true. Now, where'd that come from? Well, it came from a Chicago writer who was upset and said, well, they can bring anybody, even from a bar, and put them in there, you know, and that stuck. It wasn't true, but that's the story. Everybody thinks that he had come from a tavern and played goal, and he was drunk, and it was nothing like that. He was at home, and he came in, he played, and the next game they brought in a spare goalie. They lost. Chicago lost, and then the regular goalie was okay to play after that.
Well, never let the truth get in the way of a good story, Paul.
No, but you got to see Busher Jackson score a nice goal. Yeah.
So Alfie actually was quoted in the clip we saw saying, they wanted me to play because I'm a bum.
Yeah. Well, that's what the Chicago management thought too. But to have a fist fight with the owners over this, yeah, that was, and I think, was it Stewart, his grandson, Paul Stewart, the former referee and player. That's quite a story. We could talk about that some other time.
All
Another
right.
thing that happened in the 30s. That's why we got to do a 30s documentary. I guess I was kidding.
This is 1966 and a number 4 playing for the Bruins. Why is this footage significant?
Well, because Hockey Night Canada made a special trip to Boston to watch this game. Actually, it's in Detroit. But one thing you have to notice, Bobby Orr here, it's his first ever NHL shift. Okay. And he runs into a fellow wearing number 9 on the other team. And you'll see that shortly.
A fellow that we had in a clip earlier, I believe.
That's right. Yeah.
There he is.
What?
A guy named Hal.
There you go. You know, that's his initiation. But you notice the Red Wings have the numbers on the back of their sweaters? I mean,
yes.
their names. They never had names back then on the back of the sweaters. This was just an experimental thing for I guess the first 1 or 2 games. So that's an amazing clip to see Bobby Orr's first shift ever, 18 years old, skating like the wind. Unbelievable.
For decades, we've heard defensemen hailed as the next Bobby Orr, which is an unfair label, if there ever was one, an unfair burden. Cale Makar of the Avalanche, I think, is the latest to have that attached to him, to be so anointed. Back in 66, Paul, was even Bobby Orr expected to be Bobby Orr at the NHL level? Yes.
I saw him playing in junior. I saw his first ever junior game, 14 years old, with the Oshawa Generals. Real small, but you could tell right there he was something special. But you don't know how he's going to develop in the NHL because you don't know what size he's going to be and what teammates he has. Now, he didn't have very good teammates the first year or two with the Bruins, but later on, they had a great team. And unfortunately, the knee injuries stopped his career when who knows how long he would have played.
Okay, everybody. See if you can figure out the historical significance of the Leafs-Canadiens game we're going to show you. We'll watch a clip, and then Paul will tell us if you guessed right.
Face off outside the Maple Leaf blue line on the far wing in front of the Maple Leaf players bench. Beliveau back at center ice now, number 4. Russo, number 15, and Dump, number 8. A long shot is wide of Bauer. There's Keon now with Armstrong and McKinney. Stanley and Douglas on the defense. Goes back to J.C. Tremblay. His pass for Russo. Russo flipped it right on the Douglas' stick. Over to McKinney. Over the line, closing in. A pass for Keon. Gets barely get his shot. Armstrong back to Douglas. Back to Armstrong. Back for Douglas. Duff gets a hold of it. And play is called. And there'll be a penalty.
Okay, Paul, what's the answer?
Well, if you know your players, you can tell that 64-65 season. And back then, didn't color televisions come in Canada in 1966? So this was an experiment.
Face off.
2 years before they actually had color TVs in Canada. No one else would have watched this except maybe executives from Imperial Oil or whatever. And it's so nice to see something in color. So I thought we'd show this so that you can see an actual game in color without the bright lights. Looks good to me. And unfortunately, the whole game doesn't exist, but enough of it does to give you a taste of what it looks like.
Where did you ever find this?
Well, this is part of, see, back in the 70s, not just the CBC, but they sort of threw out or taped over all the quad tapes, but they took highlights out and they sent them up to the National Archives. And this is part of that collection.
Because it's just remarkable. This is not recreated colorizing of black and white footage.
Yeah.
This is it. And it looks great.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
It really takes you back.
Yeah.
So let's move backwards now to 1950. Game 7 of the Stanley Cup final between Detroit and New York. We're going to show newsreel footage of the cup-winning overtime goal, except, spoiler alert, you don't get to see the goal.
Climax to the hockey season. Pete Babando of the champion Detroit with 3-apiece tie with the New York Rangers in the Stanley Cup playoffs.
We do know what it sounded like, though, because Paul found the radio broadcast of that same goal.
As the Red Wings still pour in on him, but he's held tight. The 3-all tie. The face-off, a pass back to Babando. A shot. He scores! And the game is over. Babando scores. Well, that's it. Babando scored the winning goal with a quick wrist shot after taking a pass from G to give Detroit Red Wings the Stanley Cup.
And it turns out, Paul, you did find video of Babando's goal. Sort of.
Yeah.
Tell us about it.
Okay, so a number of cameras there somehow missed the goal. There's a color version of that and another angle of it, but they don't have the actual shot going in. Finding Foster Hewitt's call of it was kind of nice because I sent that to Pete Babando. He had never heard it, obviously, because he was playing. So here's the winning goal. What's unusual about this? Who said they didn't catch the winning goal? Well, since they missed it, the Stanley Cup film, they brought these guys together, I guess in the summertime, and recreated the goal, brought the players out there. I'll bet you no one knows that. And here we are. This is from outtakes that no one's ever seen.
Were these the actual Rangers?
They were, yeah. There's Alan Stanley, Chuck Rayner, and net. That's the real players there.
That is remarkable and weird that the Rangers would come back to relive that agony over and over again. Although on some of the outtakes, the goalie makes a save or Babando shoots wide. So maybe that was cathartic a little bit.
Yeah, that's just a bit of the footage. They had a few tries at it. We didn't show that, but they finally got it down right.
And so that was actually used in the Stanley Cup film.
Yeah, and Pete Babando had never seen it either. So he passed away shortly after I sent it to him. But the audio of him scoring is kind of a nice thing for him to listen to. That was his highest hockey moment, and so that's
well, I would think Game 7 overtime Stanley Cup final.
Now, in that newsreel, you see Gordie Howe there with the Stanley Cup. He's got kind of a funny hairstyle. That's the series before. That's when he almost lost his life when he had the head injury. So he came out of the hospital to watch Game 7 and to be with the team when they won the Stanley Cup.
That is a tremendous anecdote. I had no idea. But I'll tell you what, for the first time in 72 years, we're going to show the Babando goal, recreated though it is, and Foster Hewitt's radio call. Here it is.
The 3-3 tie. The face-off, a pass back to Babando. A shot. He scores! And the game is over. Babando scores.
How do you like that?
Thanks to you, Paul. It only took 72 years.
Yeah, it's unique and something different for people to find out that happened. So it's good to do that. Combination of audio, recreations, the actual video, the Gordie Howe story, Game 7, great stuff.
Great stuff. Sports announcers, as you know, Paul, are fond of calling a spectacular play a bomb, whether it's a long pass in football, a long home run in baseball, or a slap shot goal in hockey. Well, what happened at Maple Leaf Garden just before a Leafs-Rangers game was no metaphor. This explosion was real. Paul, why don't you tell us about that night while we show a couple of pictures?
Sure. It's Al Arbor number 3, Stanley Horton, and the Pavlich, the linesman. So what happened was during the national anthem, back in those days, you shut the lights off. They just had a recording. Someone threw a bomb onto the ice, and it hit Pavlich, the linesman, and Bobby Bond, and they were both burned. And I thought, well, geez, I wonder if this is on video. Well, it does have the aftermath of it. And I tried to ask people, what do you think happened? No one could guess. That couldn't happen today, of course. They'd empty the building. But Bobby Bond remembers it. Now, the funny thing about that, I showed this at one of the alumni lunches. And later on, someone came to me and said, well, they never solved who threw that. But I know who did. And this is like many, many years later. So but now I can't remember who told me that they know who did it. So it's an interesting thing. But yeah, that's what happened back then. Now, the other thing about that game is that the Rangers, Gump Worsley got injured. And they had to put Dave Dryden, who was a goalie for the St. Mike's team at the time. He was like a house goalie. He had to go in the net for the Rangers. So that was a pretty famous game overall, despite being bombed and everything, although Dryden got bombed in net. So by the Leafs.
Here's the footage you were talking about of Matt Pavlich. It looks like he's wiping his hands off on a towel.
Yeah, and look at Bond behind, too. Number 21. He's getting attended to.
And then they played a hockey game.
They start up. You just look at it from the point of view of today. If a bomb gets thrown, do you think they would have continued the game? I don't think so.
And Dave Dryden, that was his first NHL game. That's and the only game he ever played for the Rangers.
That's right. Yeah. You just brought him in. He was nervous and everything. We had Dave Dryden come to our lunch and he talked about that. It was fascinating because, what did they pay him $10 a game to come and watch just in case they need him and hoping they don't need him. And that's not the first time that happened when they bring in a junior goalie from their junior team to play. And so he remembers it well.
And I read that he even had to wear Worsley's sweater, which didn't fit.
That's right. Yeah.
Well, do you remember those thrilling days of yesteryear? Well, during the 1950s, the Robin Hood of the Old West, the Cisco Kid, came riding from the TV into America's living rooms. None of the 156 episodes of the Cisco Kid took place in Toronto, but somehow, maybe a wrong turn at Albuquerque, the show's star Duncan Ronaldo found himself in full Cisco Kid costume inside Maple Leaf Gardens.
But he has been surrounded for the last many minutes signing autographs for the young fans here tonight. None other than Duncan Ronaldo, the Cisco Kid. Welcome to Toronto.
Thank you very much, Wes. It was a great thrill here tonight at the hockey game.
Where's Pancho and where's Diablo?
Well, we put Pancho to work at last. And Diablo is in California right now.
That's fine.
I have to say he's on ice, but he's not.
Tell me, what about this hockey game here tonight? Is this your first
This is my first hockey game, and I'm very thrilled. I mean that sincerely. It's a very fast game. It's done with a lot of precision, and these boys are terrific here. And, of course, the, the poor referees, you know. They have no place to go. With this plexiglass around, they can't get over.
How did you come to single them out?
Well, in a bull ring, at least, the fellows that are around the bull ring can go over the wall. But these referees are stuck. And not only that, they have no protection. I never saw a referee dance so much.
Well, that's fine. Now, I understand you're going to be back and visiting us here at the Canadian National Exhibition.
Yes, Wes, I'm going to be here at the Canadian National Exhibition this summer in August. And I'm bringing my bandit, like Jack, and all the rest of the bandits, and we're going to put on a very wonderful show for the kids here.
You're going to have the horse, Diablo?
Well, of course. Without Diablo, I can't go anywhere.
Will Pancho be here, too?
Possibly.
Good. Thanks a lot.
Very hard now.
It's nice to talk to you, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your stay.
Thank you very much,
here.
and I want to thank everybody here in Toronto for being so kind and so wonderful.
Thank you. That was the Cisco Kid, and now back to Foster Hewitt.
Paul, the Cisco Kid, champion of the underprivileged, sticking up for the referees.
That's right. You know, for those that don't know the Cisco Kid TV show, just look it up on the internet. Everything's on YouTube now anyway, so watch it. And actually, it's a film. It was filmed in color in the 50s, which is really unusual. And it was a big, famous thing back in those days with Cisco Kid and Pancho. Now, the trouble is Pancho wasn't there. It would have been nice, but I guess he couldn't fit through Maple Leaf Gardens with a big hat that he wears. He's even bigger than Cisco Kid, so I don't know. Yeah, so he was in town, and I guess he was coming back for the CNE. Now, this happened in April 1959 in a playoff game against Boston. That's when this happened, and and they had the interview right with all the fans and everything. So quite a thing to have a TV star like that from Mexico, you know, allegedly.
Well, here's some Cisco Kid trivia, Paul, whether you want it or not. There have been many, many actors playing Cisco Kid and many, many movies. The latest was in 1994 when Jimmy Smits starred in a big-time remake. The earliest Cisco Kid movie, believe it or not, was in 1914. And Cisco Kid was also a comic book star, and he had his own radio serial, Serial, not the breakfast kind. He may have had that too. Duncan Ronaldo, by the way, acted in many of those movies as well as moving to TV. Last Cisco Kid fact. Did you know, Paul, that when O. Henry first introduced the Cisco Kid character in 1907, he was a murderous bad guy? Oh, Cisco.
Pancho. You can actually change. Yeah, that's what they said at the end of every show. And I just, things were different back then. It was nice to see.
Two clips to show you next from Maple Leaf Gardens. First one, a 1963 fight between Pulford and Harper. Paul, what is happening here?
Well, people are amazed nowadays to know that there was only one penalty box up until October 1963. And you see what happens when you have two guys who fight on the ice and they go back into the penalty box. They're going to fight again. And that's happened a few times. So Clarence Campbell, president of the NHL, he was there, and he said, we can't have this anymore. So the next home game, you see that the Leafs had separate penalty boxes. And
This
that's
is
how it
Bobby
started.
Bond
Bobby
and
Bond.
Stan Mikita.
Yeah, his good buddy there.
And look, they've got, it doesn't look like there's anything really between them, but at least they're separated by a couple of off-ice officials.
That's right. I think one of those officials is Ace Bailey, who, the former Leaf, who had to stop playing because of that head injury. So there's your history of how they had separate penalty boxes. But it's still incredible that they would have guys fight on the ice and put them together in the penalty box.
I have to show this clip again because the fact that they're seated next to each other like they're waiting for a bus after they just tried to rearrange each other's faces, unbelievable.
Yeah.
This must have happened more than just this one time?
Well, for sure it did. Just before that, Reggie Fleming and Kent Douglas fought in the penalty box, and it should have happened more often. But sometimes they'd put a big policeman in between, but not very often. And this was kind of too much for Clarence Campbell to take. He said, "Okay."
I was amazed when I saw that. I knew that in certain older arenas like the Boston Garden, the benches weren't on, or rather the penalty boxes weren't on the same side, which gave the Bruins as the home team an advantage. But I didn't realize they sat people who had penalties together like it's some communal table. I'm sorry, would you mind sharing this table? We're running out of space.
Well, back in those days, players disliked each other. Fulford and Harper. Harper was the type of guy who was a needler and everything, and he didn't win many fights, but he got under Fulford's skin, and they went at it.
In the 1967 Stanley Cup Final, Montreal versus Toronto, the Leafs' Jim Pappin scores a key goal. Or did he? Let's watch.
Peter Stankowski brings the puck out for Toronto, with Pappin trailing on the play. Pappin, with nowhere to go, backhands a shot in front. It's off Harper's leg and in the net. 2-0 Toronto.
Before we get your commentary, Paul, let's watch the TV broadcast of that same goal, but they determine a different goal scorer.
Up to Pappin. This Stankowski. They're over the line to Pappin. Closing in. Pappin goes to the wing. Centered it. He scores! Stankowski. Pappin's got it, and it hit Stankowski.
Well, that was an odd kind of a goal. Almost a slow-motion goal as the Leafs tried to do something to get a shot away. They were well covered. Stankowski in front. It deflects off the goalpost, and in behind Gump Worsley. A strange kind of a goal. With 36 seconds left to play, the Leafs make it 2-0.
We're going to play this again in slow motion and stop action, Paul, and you can decipher for us, was it Pappin or was it Stankowski? This is Pappin coming into the zone, throwing the pass toward the crease.
Clearly hit Stankowski's skate.
We'll see it again, and this time we're going to slow it down. It does look like the puck makes a turn into the net.
Well, there's no question it hit Stankowski's skate before it went in. Hit Harper first.
I mean, because there the puck is past Harper.
Yeah, it's going towards the boards. Then it switches. It goes into the net.
But it's officially recorded as Pappin's goal, right?
Okay. Here's the story. It was announced as Stankowski's goal. The radio intermission from that final game, all they talked about was Stankowski scoring the goal. Now you see Stemmer there being asked by John Ashley, the referee, if it was his goal. I assume he's asking. I said, no, it isn't. Well, there's a couple of reasons for that. Or maybe he didn't feel the puck hit his skate, which is possible. But Stemmer says that Pappen had this clause that, bonus if he got so many goals or something like that, and if I gave him the goal, he'd let me go to the swimming pool or stuff like that. But well, anyways, a few years ago, Stemmer calls me. He says, I got that goal really is mine. I said, yeah, I know, but I don't think they're going to change it. You see, a player wants a legacy, and what bigger legacy, at least in Toronto, is have them winning the goal for the last Stanley Cup. And Stemmer figures, well, that belongs to me. And I remember having Jim Pappen on our classic games, and he sort of says, Stemmer's still trying to get credit for that goal. Well, who'd want to give that up? You see, and so I think Stemmer have to, think that he did get the goal. Okay, it was announced at him. It didn't change the scoring until the third period when they announced it. So, but they won, and they beat Montreal. They won the Stanley Cup. Is that more important? I guess it is.
And doesn't the Stanley Cup memorabilia, some from that 67 series and from that goal, isn't there something in the Hockey Hall of Fame?
Well, the cup is there, obviously, and the names are there. But
I wondered, maybe I'm wrong. I thought I'd heard a story that the puck, listing Pappen as the goal scorer was there, or was at one time.
Well, it was Stemkowski's goal announced, and they changed it later. And basically, it's something where Stemmer feels he should get credit for it, but it's not going to happen. Although we pretty well showed it here that Stemmer did get the Stanley Cup winning goal.
I'm going to call this next clip of Mice and Men on Ice. Oilers at Leafs, March 29th, 1980. Watch.
There's the pass by Stan Weir. Hunter on his backhand. There's the save. Stan Weir goes for the rebound. You'll see the puck in the crease. Salming falls on it. And now we'll have the penalty shot.
Now somebody's throwing some live mice out on the ice.
Stan Weir, he'll be taking the shot. He was the last one to shoot it. There you see the little...
There's the live mice. They'll have to get them.
I think that's number 4. Most number 4. He will take the shot. And nobody's going near them.
Number 21, Stan Weir.
And Stan Weir, he's not being attracted by the mice running around the ice surface. He's going back to talk to Ron Lowe.
One of the pieces is after the referee. Well, that's another first.
Can you believe that?
Well,
Paul, can you believe that?
Yeah, anything happened to the Leafs in the 80s, of course. But 3 blind mice, I guess they disagree with the penalty shot, and they threw them. But I thought the camera work was excellent when those guys with the shovels were trying to chase after them. I kind of think that deserves some award or something like that. That was fun.
I was worried that they were going to place one of the mice at center ice and have Stan Weir skate in with it to shoot on Palmatier.
We don't know what happened to the mice afterwards, so I wonder. Could have been a Leaf executive that threw it on. Who knows?
Imagine smuggling in some mice and then holding on to them until the moment. And also, it's quite a distance from the stands to the ice. Poor mice.
Well, I wonder if it was an inside job then. I wonder.
Hey, There's a new mystery for you to solve.
That's the next thing we've got to figure out. Find footage of what happened to the mice afterwards. Yeah.
Well, for the record, Stan Weir, using a puck, not a mouse, did score on his penalty shot. And Wayne Gretzky had just his typical day at the office in this game. 2 goals, 4 assists. Come to think of it, Gretzky would later call the New Jersey Devils a Mickey Mouse organization. But he saw the real thing in Toronto 3 years earlier.
Yeah, actually, he could have called the Leafs that as well during the 80s. He probably thought it, but he didn't say it.
And the audio commentary, I swear I heard one of the announcers call the little rodents Mises.
Oh, was that Gary Dornhofer? He was doing the color in that game.
Yeah, I'm sure he was kidding.
I don't know.
Isn't that the plural of mouse, Mises?
Well, in cartoons it is.
Yeah, where's Tom when you really need him?
That's right.
Okay, we have a historical clip that is much more significant than that one, and we'll play that now. And I want you to notice, of course, you'll notice Willie O'Ree from this clip, but there's also part of the backstory is you'll also see an Asian couple. So I'm going to play this clip, first O'Ree, then the Asian couple, and Paul, you tell the story.
Okay.
This is at the Forum. There's Willie O'Ree, and this is his first NHL game, right?
Yep.
And how did you come by this footage?
Well, I was working for CBC Hockey People's History in 2005 and 2006. And I was familiar with their sports library, but I thought, why don't I go to the news library on a different floor and see if I can poke around there, go through their list of, there's the Prince of Laos there and his wife. So I see this listing of the Prince visiting Montreal, and they were going to take him to a hockey game. Okay, big deal. But the date sort of intrigued me. The date was the night that Willie O'Ree made his debut with the Montreal Canadiens. So I thought, well, we should maybe try to find this, get it transferred, and look at it. And it turns out it was the same night that the cameramen were there for this Prince to go to the game and all these other things. And Willie O'Ree was playing in his first game, and they realized that. Now, the CBC didn't know this, but once they transferred it, they found out that they've got a gem here, the first shifts, and Willie signing autographs back in 1957. And no one knew this existed. Just because I went up to the news library and put 2 and 2 together, and it worked out. You just never know.
Interesting. Who knows how many other amazing bits of video are buried because the cameraman went to shoot topic A and it turned out topic B was even more significant.
Yeah, that happens. Here's a prime example of it. It's just, who knows what else exists in TV shows and news items that involve hockey. And actually, there are more. Another time, if we do this another time, I'm going to show you what happened after the Richard riot that people haven't seen. That's going to be of interest to people.
Okay, good teaser. I'll watch. This next piece of video, there isn't much to say about it, but it is significant because look at the year, 1898.
Yeah, railroad workers in northern, I think, New York State. And this is Tom Edison. You've heard of him, the inventor, and he had his, camera, whatever they called it back then, and he was filming and playing hockey on the ice outdoors. It's the earliest footage of hockey that I've come across anyways. Yeah.
From the 19th century.
That's right, yeah.
And and with the stylish fedora.
Yeah.
Very nice. But you can certainly recognize the game, right?
Oh, you can. Yeah, it obviously has changed, but that's interesting to see. They played outdoors, just a bunch of road workers, and it was filmed by Thomas Edison. That's what it looked like back then.
So we'll move way into the future from 1898 all the way up to 1936, a tilt between the Canadiens and the Rangers. And the narration is absolutely delightful.
On the ice at Madison Square Garden, New York meets Montreal in the world's fastest game. Both teams pile on the pressure right from the start, and a neck-and-neck first period sees some remarkable saves from both goalies as the teams swing from end to end like a pendulum. Canadian Desolates gets the ball and streaking forward, Desolates shoots to make it first score to the Canadian. But in the third period, the New Yorkers put on speed, and spectacular play by New York's Lynn Patrick levels the score at the end of the last period. They have to stay for overtime, and with both teams going like demons, watch the final play that gives the puck to New York's Frank Boucher and the final goal that clinches victory for the New York Rangers.
Well, that's a spinorama goal at the end there.
I love that. And Lynn Patrick scoring.
Yeah. You know, British Pathé, they've got a lot of footage from the 20s, 30s in their archives. And this British fellow must have just put the voiceover afterwards. But I got to show this to Joe Bowen so he can use that pendulum swinging over. That's a great, he should use that for the way the game's going back and forth.
Absolutely. And skating like demons. That's writing. Wow. Yeah. Although I didn't realize they were playing with a ball instead of a puck. But
yeah, well, they weren't that familiar with hockey over in good old jolly England, right?
I did notice too. Maybe it's the quality of the film, of the footage, but it looked like some of the hockey markings that we're used to today, they didn't have on the ice then. Do you know whether that's true or not?
Well, for sure it's true. First of all, you saw them facing off in a different direction. That's what they did back then. And I don't know if this particular footage has it, but there was a penalty shot circle back in the 30s where different variation of it. But if it was a penalty shot, you had to actually shoot it from that circle. And we've got footage of a New York Americans game where they win 1-0 on a goal on a penalty shot from someone taken from the circle. So yeah, ice surface changed a bit, and there couldn't have been a red line there either at that time. So that did happen to the war.
As understated as that narration was, this next one from 1932 is hilariously over the top.
A nice, gentle game full of battered shins, cracked skulls, broken arms, tangled legs, and nosedives. Just watch the fast play between the Philadelphia Arrows and the Boston Cubs. Major teams in the Canadian-American League, both out to take the first victory of the year. Dashing all around the arena with spills, thrills, and socks to make it more exciting for the fans. Jedwa, Boston's big defense star, and Boyd of the Philadelphia Arrows, both played sensational hockey. But Jedwa was accused of getting rough when he bumped Boyd, starting a feud that raged throughout the game. resulting in plenty of clashes and arguments between the rivals on the two teams, which reached its climax when another player was thrown flat on his face. Then Boyd rushed at Gentry with blood in his eye and tore into him. Look, they're mixing it up, and now they're going down into a heap with the others piling on. What a fight!
Oh, the Canadian American Hockey League. This is the 1920s, I think, late 20s. Philadelphia Arrows. Wow, my favorite team back then, by the way. Okay, so.
You were young then.
That's right. Yeah, I tell you, that's rare footage.
Well, that's also some more phraseology for the Leafs announcer Joe Bowen. Thrills, chills, and spills.
That's right. Yeah, I feel like the pendulum swinging. Well, the pendulum swinging is the best. Okay.
My favorite, Paul, was battered shins, cracked skulls, broken arms, tangled legs, and nosedives.
Yeah, that's right.
That sounds like dinner time on fried chicken night at my house. How come we don't get that kind of commentary anymore?
Oh, well, we can start.
Oh my gosh. That guy needed to switch to decaf.
That's right.
So we'll close with this last one. Some old-time hockey and an old-time goalie from France, and I think this is from like 1910. It's going to take a few seconds here, Paul, before we actually get to the goalie, who's the highlight of these highlights. But how the heck did you ever come upon 1910 footage from France?
Yeah, well, yeah, that's a good question. I don't have an answer. Obviously, filming in 1910 is, rare and new. And so they're hamming it up here. But the earliest footage of a goaltender is coming up now that I have. And this goalie, he knows the camera's on him. Okay.
Yeah. He's to the right of the screen with his back to us.
But look at that. Watch his moves and everything. Now, I don't know if the Leafs can sign him or not because they need a goalie, but he'd be more entertaining than anything. But he's a ham. He knows the camera's there. This is really early filming, and that's how hockey was played back then. Look at him. Yeah, well, he makes sure to look at the camera after he made that move.
I don't know if this would be a drawback to signing him, but he'd be 132 years old.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe he'll come back out of retirement. But it's interesting seeing how hockey was played back then.
Well, in one of the earlier clips, I saw a goalie, when they didn't wear masks, of course, wearing a baseball cap.
That's right. Yeah. Well, we got lots of footage we can show you from 1920s and 30s and show you how the game was different. Maybe we can do that on another show.
Well, this one was so much fun. I hope we could hold you to that, Paul, because this was such a blast getting just a little taste of what's inside your video vault. So if you'll honor us by going back in there sometime and pulling out some more clips, we would certainly appreciate it.
Well, there is a lot more, I tell you. More interesting footage, the Broco puck and the Richard riot and all these things that people haven't seen before. And some of it corrects history. And that's the idea. Film doesn't lie. So it's going to be a good show if we do it again.
Because it's important to mention, you're not just an archivist, you're a hockey historian. And so one thing we know about historians, they want to get things right. And it kind of bugs them when something goes into the popular culture that's a myth or just plain wrong.
Well, when you go on Facebook and you see people saying certain things and it's incorrect, you try to correct it with proof, they still don't believe it. So it doesn't matter.
Well, at least you tried.
That's right. So,
Paul, this was an absolute blast. Thank you for sharing this stuff. This was so enjoyable, and I know our audience feels the same way.
well, thanks for having me, and until next time. Thanks. Great job, Glenn.
Well, and great job to you, also the godfather of Hockey Time Machine.
Oh, well, I can be a godfather. We joke about that all the time, and we'll just continue. We have a lot of good shows lined up, future Thursdays, and different shows. We'd like to do things differently and learn, and so keep watching Thursday nights, and it's on YouTube too, so you can watch it there too.
Thanks, Paul. That's all for this edition of Hockey Time Machine. Join us next time when Paul promises to open a portal to an alternate dimension in which the Maple Leafs have won the last 7 Stanley Cups. Until then, thanks for watching, everybody. I'm Glenn Dreyfus. Good night.